Hey everybody, welcome back to Pod Sass, where we put the sass in sassy. I'm your host Chris Shang, and today we have a great episode talking to Danny from Soapbox. Soapbox is basically a one-stop solution for anybody selling anything and everything online. And we had a great conversation where he talks about his amazing Lego collection as an adult.
Pod Sass, where we're putting the sass back in sassy. Sponsored by LeadrPro, where you can book demos with target customers on demand and fill your sales pipeline instantly.
All right, thanks for joining us today. Today we have Danny from Soapbox. Hey Danny, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, of course, man. So tell us just like a quick elevator pitch about Soapbox. Everybody definitely wants to get to know, what the product or the services are that our guests are offering, and then maybe why is this a problem that you're solving?
Yeah, so Soapbox is a software that we created about 2 years ago, and it was built to solve a very specific problem within fulfillment and e-commerce. And essentially, what we provide is an end-to-end, fully vertical fulfillment management solution. It is a first-of-a-kind solution that really ties in everything from storefront and order management to inventory, warehouse management, down to like packaging management, returns, and the like. So it's a software that we believe really can revolutionize the way that fulfillment is done. But I think more importantly, it's really native to e-commerce, right? So we've built it in mind with not connecting it to legacy solutions, which is really how we're able to offer really a streamlined and elegant solution that's simple, easy to use, and out of the box.
So it's kind of like an A to Z one-stop solution for somebody who's selling something online.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Cool. I wanted to do, we do the series of questions here called just like a lightning round, 10 questions, rapid fire. Helps kind of loosen things up. I've got like 10 questions I want to ask you real quick. First answer that comes to mind. And obviously if you have any questions, I feel like our producer may have shared with you just kind of the idea behind it, but feel free to shoot those to me afterwards, just to democratize the process a little bit. If anything is like uncomfortable, I don't think so, but like if anything's uncomfortable, like obviously feel free to just use a pass. You can phone a friend if you want to. I'm just kidding, but you could just take a pass. But yeah, let's just kind of kick it off. It's all kind of related to the startup world and just kind of like entrepreneurial journey. So I think some things that we all kind of endure. So starting off, favorite entrepreneur?
Gosh, I don't know that I have one, to be completely honest. I think a lot of people who are entrepreneurs kind of find one that they really kind of mold after. And for me, I really kind of try to take on the best of multiple entrepreneurs in this space. But I would say the ones that really kind of treat business with a lot of humanity and grace.
Good answer. Best piece of advice you were ever given?
Yeah, so this was an advice that was given about 15 years ago. I was kind of going through a rough patch in my life, and a person who was actually a trucker at the time, a commercial trucker, he gave me the best advice that I still hold true today, which is that sometimes you dodge the bullet and sometimes the bullet dodges you. So you just kind of let things happen and let things be.
Very wise piece of advice there. One to think about for sure. That's a good one. One piece of advice you give your 18-year-old self?
That's so funny because I have that exact question for you as well. Commit. Whatever it is that you do to it, commit to doing it and commit to seeing it through, and just see where it takes you.
That's a good one. Best purchase you've made as an adult that would make your 10-year-old version of you proud?
Legos, just so many Legos.
Yeah. You're a Lego fanatic?
I am. As a kid, I didn't grow up with a lot of money. My parents were very frugal, and they gave as much as we could, but we could never afford Legos because obviously very expensive. So as an adult, I'd say it's for my kids, but it's really for me. I have a pretty significant Lego collection. So.
Yeah. No, I feel you on that one. For me, it was like I would love Legos, but it was also too expensive. My parents were very frugal, and instead I would always get the discounted version, which was the Constructs. I don't know if you remember those things, but those like cheaper than the Legos, and that's what I would end up getting. Cool. Worst job you ever had?
Worst job I ever had. I've never had a job that I didn't appreciate at that time. I will say that there was a couple of situations where it made me kind of feel really uncomfortable because the jobs and my management required me to do things that were not quite above board. So those jobs were the ones that I tend to not like, but I still learn from them. So it's not necessarily the worst, just positions that made me uncomfortable. So
What did you want to be as a kid?
uh
Do you remember?
everything.
Everything?
Everything. I just whatever I think that was one thing that stood out for me was that whatever I could do, I wanted to do. Whatever at the moment that I was good at, or anything, everything.
Would you want your kids to be entrepreneurs?
I think the purpose of starting this business and working so hard is that so they don't have to, and they can do whatever they'd like. So if they want to be an entrepreneur, that's great. But I do this more or less out of necessity. I hope that they have more of a choice.
And the last question I have for you is, what do you want your legacy to be?
There are better ways to do business. There are ethical, moral, positive ways. You don't have to exploit others to do something great. And I think I'd like to be able to build something meaningful using that type of pathway. Do I get to ask you questions?
Yeah, feel free. Shoot away. Let's do it.
I do have some interesting questions for you because that's the one thing I've noticed is you're in fantastic shape, right? So how do you find the motivation to stay in shape, and how often do you work out a week?
Dude, I am. I take that. I appreciate that. I definitely am probably pretty hard on myself in terms of what I feel is good shape. But I would say my journey to getting into the shape I'm in now, though, like I don't know, we've known each other for quite a while now. I feel like so when I first met you, definitely wasn't in the shape I'm in now. I feel like I've lost about 20 pounds since then, and really it was like no real secret other than committing. Right? It was like making a decision to get in the best shape of my life. There's a few reasons to that, but I think the biggest thing is like cancer runs in my family, colon cancer runs in my family. My dad passed away from colon cancer, so health has always been at the forefront of my mind. But I've always made excuses for why I can't run, why I can't eat right, all those kinds of things. And I just got to a place where like I didn't want to make those excuses anymore. And so I just made a commitment, like a year from now, I want to be in the best shape of my life. I didn't know what that meant. All I knew is that that's what I wanted to do. And so I just started by walking 10,000 steps every day. And then by committing to that simple thing, I started to eat better. I started to get into better shape, started to lose weight. I started to look at what I was actually consuming. And then that evolved to me running, like jogging a little bit more. Before I would like be winded within 10 minutes, like, and I couldn't run at all. And then, I'd say fast forward a year and a few months later, I just did like 2 ultra marathons in October. And that's something like I never thought I would do in my life. And I actually ended up getting tattooed on my arm the time that it took me to complete the first ultra. Just because it was like it was a moment that I had that I was just, I think, over inundated with this feeling of self-pride. And I cried in the car after I finished it. Like my body was broken, but it was like one of those moments where I didn't know how to explain it, but I hope everybody has that experience where you just feel so much pride for yourself because you accomplished something that you never thought you would. And that was just like a journey of like a year and a half to kind of get to that point. So
Incredible. It's incredible to find that motivation intrinsically, right? Obviously you've had external factors, but that's fantastic. Okay, I have I don't know if we call this like a personal question, but it is a question that is top of mind for me because, you know, and it's about privacy, right? So how much do you value privacy, especially since, obviously your fiance is a celebrity and being part of the celebrity means that you're in public space, right? So, how much do you value privacy? How do you manage it?
that's a good question. I've never really thought about it that way. I do feel like my fiance and I we both come from very, very different worlds. Somehow we work and we connect in a very deep level. And hers is one that is very public, and mine's one that is, well, fairly private till now. And I think the best way to look at it is like, I think I'm not too concerned about sharing my truths, right? Like what good, bad, ugly, whatever. It wasn't always like that, but I think it's something where the past few years, like I've definitely dealt with a lot of my insecurities from my 20s and then also in my 30s. And once you kind of overcome those insecurities, it's kind of like you feel very comfortable being an open book. And so while I don't actively seek to be, sharing my information or like all my stuff, out there on the platform, like, I don't use social media really. Like I don't have Instagram on my phone, and, I don't use, the only thing I really use is maybe like Facebook to see how my high school friends are doing, but that's really like it. And so I think in that way, like I'm somewhat private, and I try to keep, I try to keep that, but it's I think it's like a lot of self-reflection and self-work to get to a point where it's like I don't need external validation. So once I realized I don't need external validation, there's no point in kind of making anything really public. It's more like do the work quietly, do it for yourself, and that's kind of where I'm at.
Okay, that's fantastic. Last question. I mean, we have a bunch of other questions, but last question before we kind of go into this is Asian parents, right? Notorious for demanding, ultra demanding success for their parents and such. What do you think your parents think of your success so far?
I mean, that's a good question too. I would say that I think my mom's really proud, and I think my dad would be proud too. I think about it a lot, especially my dad passing away like 8 to 9 years ago at this point. So when I was like late 20s, actually probably longer than that now, but it is one of those things that tug at you. And I've talked to a couple of other founders that have lost like their parents or somebody really close to them, and how that actually impacts, I think, your perspective as a person as well as like professionally. But it's obvious. It's an obvious. Like I mean, there's no way to escape it. But I would feel like they're proud. I mean, I think it's like my mom's always still worried, like, make sure you save all your money. Make sure you save all your money. She's like, you're making good money, now save all your money. I was like, okay. Yeah. But, I think like, I think outside of that though, yeah, they're proud. I mean, it wasn't always that way. I was definitely lost for a significant portion of my life in terms of direction. I did the corporate thing out of college because that's what my parents wanted me to do. It was never anything I wanted to do. Like, as a kid, I was very much a creative, and I just remember like I was writing poetry in like 6th grade, 7th grade. That was like amazing poetry looking back at it now, and drawing, and I was really good at those things, but it was never like fostered or like or pushed as a viable path. And so obviously everything works out the way that they work out, but I do feel like for a long time, that was my chip on my shoulders. Like I didn't go down the path that my parents wanted me to go down, in terms of like becoming, the traditional things. Like there's usually like 5 categories, right? Like accountant, lawyer, doctor, business professional, one of those lines, something very stable, something very predictable. And that was just never me. And it took me a long time, but I found my way, I found my path, later in my life. But I think them seeing and my mom seeing kind of like how I maneuvered through all those things and then found my integrity, found my way to where I am at today. She's probably really proud of that.
It's an interesting thing, I think, to grow up in the States as an Asian American and to have, let's see, yeah, it's like an entire a separate discussion on it. But it's yeah, I'm always curious to hear, not so much how we feel about it, right? But there's so much expectation coming from our parents, and it feels like no matter where you're at, they've always given up certain things. So I always ask the question, like, do they feel it's worth it, right? Mm-hmm. Like do your parents feel like it's worth it for them, given where you're at? And it's interesting to hear those responses. Cool. Well, thanks.
Yeah. No, I mean, I to just kind of enhance on that point. I mean, that's something I had to dive into quite a bit, because I feel like a lot of my insecurities growing up into an adult was stemmed from, this idea of like, and this is not intentional, but I feel like, a lot of Asian parents raise their kids on a shame-based system. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Where it's like, and it's very common. And I think like, especially me being like firstborn male, first generation, a lot of pressure, a lot of things that you're supposed to be doing as an example to your siblings, as setting an example for just the community and for my parents to be able to show off on. And it's like, and I just never, was that, and it wore on me in a lot of ways. But yeah, I think like it's crazy. Like, I think I was looking at some statistics like recently where it's like the number one demographic of suicide in the United States is like Asian kids between the ages of 18 and 24. And like, I feel like Asian communities also have the biggest stigma towards like mental health and like getting therapy and all that kind of stuff, for whatever reason. But it's like, but the statistics kind of show in of itself that like, I think that there's a real disconnect in bringing those Eastern values into a Western culture and expecting the same outcome. It's just, I think it's a lot to put on, and I don't think we talk about it enough.
I mean, growing up for me, as was never talked about, was like happiness, right? Like the concept of happiness for our parents, I think generation, I think we're very close to age. For our parents' generation was always like success, right? In some metric, or like having a stable job. It's almost always economic, right? And so it's kind of interesting that our generation, we look at success and happiness differently. I mean, we find, I think, validation and happiness through being entrepreneurs, right? And creating something out of nothing. Where I think there's some, although there's some respect certainly within the older generations, a lot of them, if given the choice to start something or to get like a steady job, right, almost always will be the latter, right? It will never. It's, why are you just going to start something? Like, you've got a perfectly good job right here, making perfectly good money. Why are you going to go and risk it all so that you can? Well, because it makes me happy, right? Like, it's the concept of like this job, this high paying job, or whatever job that you've got, just cannot make you happy, is like, almost feels like a foreign idea to them, right? It's interesting situation.
Yeah, I mean, flipping the script, I mean, I feel like that's a good segue to talk about your business and kind of your journey, right? It's like, I know you come from a more corporate background historically, and how'd you decide to make that jump, and with all those kind of like external factors, family, parents, I don't know what your current relationship situation is, or I know you just had kids recently. All these external factors go into this, and obviously leaving something stable and building something brand new that's like a big question mark on it, in terms of what the outcome will be. Like, that's a big risk, and it takes definitely like a certain DNA to do that. So curious as to like what your thought process was, to make that transition. What was the motivating factor for you?
To give a little bit about my background, from LA. I've lived really everywhere in the country. I got my MBA in New York, and post MBA, I joined IBM as a client executive, managed the Disney account for IBM globally. And it was a really enlightening experience to see really, large corporate company, how they operate, how they facilitate success is, I think, the proper term for it. And I think there's a lot of good to be learned by it. I think, and in fact, much like I have this theory that I think everybody that's young should live in New York for at least a part of their life, because it 100%. Kind of really, right? You know what I mean? Like, it kind of.
Yeah, I lived in New York. I get it.
Yeah, you know what I mean, right? It's not so much that you have to stay there, but just being able to broaden your horizon, just open your eyes to just certain things about the world and about yourself too. So IBM, I feel like, from a business perspective, from a just a professional perspective, I think everybody should at some point or another work for a large corporation, whether you like it or not, because they're large for a reason. And what you learn is organizational structure. You learn the things that got them to that point, why they organize things a certain way. And I think having that structure really lends itself very well to entrepreneurship, because the one thing that you will consistently hear about startups and entrepreneurs is it's like managed chaos, right? Like, it's just just trying to get things done, and it's just like, okay, once you have this, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? And one of the tenets that we wanted to bring in design of our software was video games, right? Like you think about a video game UI, you can have somebody that's a kid that can play it. You can have somebody that's like 90 years old that can play it, and it's the same set of data, right? So that was kind of the design, really the design element that we wanted to bring forth in a business to business solution was, can we implement this video game design, UX and UI tenants to a business to business tool to simplify it, right? So that's also a big piece of what we want to be able to build out is, and what we have built out is something that's simple, easy, elegant, and you can pick it up really off the shelf. I had an opportunity to really learn from some of the best in the industry at what they do in creating digital experiences. And so it was really an enlightening experience, fantastic time in learning and really just learning not only something new, but learning from some of the best in the world at something new. So really just an invigorating experience. When we had our first kid, we moved back to Los Angeles, and I joined a company, a mid-sized CPG, about 300 billion a year, as the COO. And really a couple of operational jobs that we were tasked with. One was to consolidate the operations and modernize the infrastructure. And the second was to launch a couple of e-commerce companies for them. And we were able to do that fairly successfully, I'd say. But through that process there, we identified a lot of, I would say, solutioning gaps. So we worked with FedEx consulting to help us find different solutions to kind of manage our growth, manage e-commerce growth. And we just weren't finding anything that made sense. So as an example, the first company that FedEx came back with was ShipStation, because it was a preferred partner. And they, for FedEx, you have inventory issues, you've got a warehousing issue, you've got a bunch of these issues. Try ShipStation as a baseline. Well, that's great, but we don't just have shipping problems, right? We do have inventory issues. We do have warehousing issues. We have issues with managing our storefronts. We've got issues with managing our returns and customer support. And so as we started diving into solutioning and how do you basically scale your growth, the problems in this ecosystem became kind of more and more transparent to me. We were either forced to use like 5 different software, 6, 8, whatever different software, try to figure out how to integrate all of this together and then manage all of them separate. And that's what we would call like, this is our workflow. This is what we needed to do for operations.
Did you start building that solution as the CEO of this CPG company, or did you did you identify the pain as in that company and then make the decision to transition and build it?
Yeah. So we identified the pain. I identified the pain while I was in this other company, and it caught me off guard that there wasn't anything like this. And so we went back to FedEx multiple times, like, hey, you got to be kidding me. Like, this is a very well-known issue. It's a pain point that, quite frankly, every business has, whether you're large or small. Every single business has this pain point, and yet there's no solution for this. Then FedEx and UPS being the largest carrier companies in the world, and they have exposure to every technology in the space. They're like, no, there really isn't anything here. And that was kind of like the light bulb moment for me was, let's jump on this. Let's develop something that, is first of a kind, that looks and feels so similar because there are moving pieces, all of these moving pieces in the ecosystem, but at the same time is so unique because none of it has ever tied all of it together.
Like, so when does Soapbox come into play, right? So like, did you quit your job and then start on Soapbox? Were you doing it in tandem and starting Soapbox as a side hustle while working full time? Like, how did you make that transition and that leap ultimately?
Yeah, no, it was an on-off switch. As soon as I realized that this is an opportunity that I needed to focus on, I left the previous company to start Soapbox. We actually sold our house to initially fund this. We had another house that we could stay in. So we sold the house we had in the East Coast to kind of fund this business and get it started. And for me, it was like a day one. I knew I wanted to do this and I was going to commit to it. And I also knew that there wasn't going to be anything that was going to hold me back to this. Like I didn't want to be distracted. I didn't want this to be a side hustle. I knew that if this was going to be the next thing, right? If we're going to build this to be the next great thing, we have to put our full effort and energy and minds into this. So that's what I did.
So you sold your house to fund this business?
We sold our house to fund this business, yes. And we didn't take any outside funding at all. We didn't join any accelerators until a year after.
Wow. Wow. You must have a very strong support system at home.
We do. So I'm very fortunate to have that. Well, we're also very fortunate to be able to, I think, have make a decent amount with the house that was sold. My wife works for a fantastic job that really helped with the healthcare and health insurance and all that such. And so we were able to really grow this. I was allowed to be able to focus on growing this business from the ground up. And I treat it like a full-time job, right? I think a lot of people, when they first start up, they kind of feel like there's so much to do, and yet there isn't enough to do. But I think if you treat it as a full-time job, you'll get full-time results for it. So
it's interesting to hear the different, I think the different journeys that people take to get there. And so it seems like for you, you just like were working in a situation where you saw this kind of like big enterprise type of like pain point that you were personally encountering at this company, realized that you needed to jump on this, and then at least like had, I feel like, the support system, but also I think like the resources to at that point make that decision to commit full time. And I think that's really great. And it probably speaks a lot to, I think, like where you guys have realized a lot of your successes, because I know that we just had the holiday season. You being, a back-end logistics company for e-commerce businesses, sure, it's a really super busy time of year for you. Why don't you speak a little bit about how far you've come and what have you learned in 2021? Because I just know from the beginning of the year to now, or even just like last holiday season to now, it's a night and day difference. And so, what does that look like for you in terms of like if you're being reflective and looking at what your day was like a year ago from today? I'd be curious as to like what you've noticed the differences are if you're to explain that.
I think the biggest thing is that you realize as an entrepreneur that you were never an entrepreneur by yourself. I think a lot of people get that, make that mistake of thinking that it's a solo path. It is certainly a lonely path, and certainly something that is so incredibly difficult to relate to, even to other founders and the other entrepreneurs. At the same time, the burden isn't just on you, right? So when you start a business, it impacts your family, impacts your friends. When you start a business, when you have a startup, it is a family affair. It is just your entire environment that you're in, all of it is affected. So I think that's probably the biggest piece of this. Was this time last year, we were so small. We had less than 10 people. We were just kind of rolling through and trying to really, quite frankly, figure out our offering and our fits. We had the product launched, but we were generating really minimal revenues because we really kind of missed the mark on our revenue model, our money generating model. This year, I think we're a little bit more cognizant of the people around us. We kind of not only in the support system that we have, but what the type of commitments that they have to have in order for us to succeed too. So I have a 6-month-old and a 4-year-old, and my wife has just been so gracious in being able to at times just handle it all on her own. So certainly we have help. I mean, we moved in with my mom here. Like that's never an easy situation, right? But these are the kind of this is the cost of doing business that nobody ever tells you about. Right? Is you kind of have to do whatever it takes to make it work. And the one thing that is incredibly difficult to do as an entrepreneur, but it is an advice that I've heard, really 2 decades ago, is that the greatest threat to a startup is the entrepreneur. It's almost always the case where the entrepreneur gets in the way of the business. And I really wanted to make sure that I never put the business, put myself in line with the business or have any conflicts, or make sure that, when we're committing to this, we're committed to this. So that, I think that commitment to it really kind of lends itself to the success that we've had this year. We were, just getting under $200,000 in revenues for the year last year, and this year we're going to be dropping in just under 10 million, right? In 1 year. We had less than 10.
And how big's the team? Oh, you're about to get there.
Yeah. Last year we had less than 10 employees at this time. Now we have over 40. I think the growth has been catalyzed by the fact that not only are we committing, my co-founder is committing, co-founder Jordan Phillips, not only are we committing to this, but I think we found people on our team that are also committing to this. And, it's, even though that they're not entrepreneurs, they've taken the entrepreneur mentality of like, let's, whatever the cost, right? And that's kind of why I led with this as an ecosystem of people. It's not just like one person doing it, because it's our entire company that's committing to the excellence and delivering this. And it shows in our top line and bottom line. It shows in the opportunities and pipeline that we have, and the exciting kind of purviews that we've got moving forward here. So the biggest thing I've learned is, just have the respect and dignity for the people around you. Make sure that you treat the people around you that are supporting you well, and they will in turn make sure that you're kind of put in the best position to succeed.
It's a great piece of advice. And I think like that's probably the best theme to kind of take away from this conversation here. On that note, I feel like, we can kind of wrap things up. And I feel like, I think that's a really good point to be made. That the success of where you guys are from a year ago to today is really about people, and the fact that you built a team that bought into that entrepreneurial spirit of whatever it takes, to get things done. Because obviously working for a startup is very different than making a decision to work for a corporate company. The stability isn't there necessarily. There definitely has to be something else that motivates you. Having equity in what it is that you are actually building, and then having more say or decision-making power in what the outcomes are. I feel like that's also part of like as a founder or somebody who's doing the hiring in these early stages, right? Like you got to sell them on that vision too, and they have to buy into that. And that stems from you as a leader steering the ship for this company. So, kudos to you for that tremendous growth. I mean, I think it just speaks to how you've operated as a CEO and as a founder of Soapbox. So I think if there's any other listeners that are starting an e-commerce or have an e-commerce business, or know of people at larger e-commerce brands, again, share a little bit more about what Soapbox does that helps them streamline operations and then create that level of visibility and transparency that makes their day-to-day so much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think from a benefits perspective, really, quite frankly, no operator of an e-commerce business wants a more complex environment to operate in. Simplicity is key in operations. Simplicity means that you're able to save time, money, effort, energy, and frustration in this space. And that's the biggest takeaway that you get with Soapbox, both our software and managed services, is that we really make e-commerce easy. Not just shipping, not just inventory, not just warehousing, et cetera, because as an e-commerce company, your problems aren't just shipping. They're not just inventory. They're not just returns, et cetera. It's all of them. So that's, I think, the biggest difference between what we can offer and what anybody else in this space can offer or do, is that we are that all-in-one, and we can be able to do that day one for you. Beyond, I think that as an entrepreneur and as a startup and a startup founder, I think pay the premium for people, invest in your people, invest not just economically, but invest in their well-being, invest in their sanity and mental health. Because I don't know that there's a single startup ever that has succeeded just based off of a single lone like ace or superstar, right? It's a team effort. Why I kind of bring that here is because that's what Soapbox offers. As a platform, as a solution, we augment the team that you've got. We make their lives easier, make their jobs easier. And we're able to do it pretty effectively, I would say, as well.
Yeah, and even more than that, you're a partner.
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool. Well, thanks again, Danny, for taking the time today. It was great to learn more about you, about Soapbox, more about your personal background. I don't think we've ever really kind of like sat down and talked about it privately, let alone publicly here. But I think it was great to kind of know more about your personal journeys. Thanks again for taking the time and being a guest today. That was a great conversation that we had with Danny just now. And so if you want to catch future episodes similar to this conversation, please subscribe below and or give us 5-star reviews because we love them reviews. Please keep them coming. Catch you guys next time.